Hello and most welcome to 1979 of the series. 1979 was the year when Steven Weinberg got the Nobel Prize. He was considered the greatest physician at the time of his death 2 years ago, a position that he had upheld for quite some time. Very influential and I'd say a very strict materialist and determinist. Great figure. We will remember him with gratitude. Yes, that's one of his more famous books, Foundations of Modern Physics. Very influential as well.
Wine, bear. Wine, it sounds like wine.
Wine is good.
Wine is.
Now is the time for mulled wine. The season is on. Weinberg.
Wine. Speaking of wine, I read about the island of Lesbos this morning. Aristotle went there. I love wine.
Oh,
Wine.
wine. So we will continue with the B part of David McNeill's et al.'s growth points from the very beginning. Last time we mentioned that understanding the gesture for understanding, gripping, for instance, there are many more, is also similar to the motoric movement of gripping something, like me gripping this cup or reaching out for something. If I reach out to somebody, that is also quite the thing you do. So we're not as unconnected as we usually think. To make it even more connected, we went into Meads loop and mirror neurons. And how we understand ourselves by mirroring ourselves. So our gestures gets mirrored in our own system. George Herbert Mead wrote that gestures become significant symbols when they implicitly arouse in an individual, making them the same response which they explicitly arouse in other individuals. So it's a sort of direct feedback loop that goes into oneself, but at the same time into others. This is how we understand, progress. And now you can understand also, or grip, or grip, yeah, how this is important for gestures as well. They gain even more leverage this way, going from slightly important to pervasively important, or as I would say, not to be ignored. Gestures, even when they can't be seen, take the holistic approach, and without them, there wouldn't be meaning at all in us. This is to be compared to the somewhat stale situation in Ferdinand Saussure, where everything is finished, broken off, static, if you like. Nothing is happening. It's sign and signified, no movement, and of course there is no free will. Everything is like Steven Weinberg, static and still. Nothing new can evolve. Nothing new happens. Everything gets interpreted in the old.
So soon means static, static, static,
It is most definitely static.
static, static.
It's an after position, one could say, to after the collapse of the
Superposition.
superposition or the potentiality wave. After that, we are doomed. Nothing more will happen. And we will become onlookers to our own reality. Observers in the theatrical way, non-participating observers. Standing by, bystanders, you could say. Not being involved. I look at the world and it happens by itself. I think that could be pretty close. I like to see the activity of the mirror neurons, their read off, what they read off from ourselves and others as spirals. It's a movement, and all movement, as we know, are some sort of spiral activity. It goes inward and it goes outward. They are not mere X, Y, Z's on a Cartesian perpendicular space scheme like this. Here movement would be a passage from T1 to T2, a sort of straight thing, a trajectory. This is not what movement is. Movement is, so to say, chaotic and fractal. It's inside its own reality. So you see, it's very hard to get rid of this model. It's very pervasive. It gets into everything. So one thinks that the movement is a sort of straight line from A to B, or from 1 to 2. Here I move from position 1 to position 2. No, movement is non-linear itself. There is no linear movement. And the first one to question this was, of course, Euclid. And then Euclid got questioned in the non-Euclidean idea of movement. Would promote, it was the last words. I will continue on the second paragraph with a subtitle, but not gesture first, at page 126. But not gesture first. Good to hear you. The means loop mechanism, however, does not mesh well with the claim that language began as gesture, recently reactivated 18th century theory. Gesture first points that early humans first developed something like sign language. Then, as we and our linguistic conceptualizations became more complex, speech supplanted the gesture-based system, with gesture scaffolding the transition. Scaffolding. Such accounts, however, are founded on an inadequate analysis of current state of the language evolution process. Gesturing is integral to modern day language and is evidence of the distinctive mode of cognition that we have described here. Gesture first provides instead sign systems, or pantomime, as stepping stones. Great. Yesterday's leap is a stepping stone. An unspoken assumption of such theories is that gesture, pantomime, this is slightly important. Gesture pantomime would have provided an easy entree to proto-language because the modality affords iconic depiction. There may indeed have been pantomimes without vocalizations for communication at the dawn. In dawn. In which case, pantomime could have had its own evolution, landing at a different point on Kendon's continuum. Kendon's continuum. Continuum. Reflected today in the different temporal relationship to speech. Alternating rather than synchronous. With gesticulation, the individual speaker constructs a combination of speech and gesture combined at the point of maximal co-expressiveness. In pantomime, none of these occurs. None.
None. None.
None. As a stepping stone, it could not have led to such combinations. There is no co-construction with speech, no co-expressiveness, and timing is different. 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 If there is speech at all. At all. The very same movement that in figure 1, for example, hollowness arising, if you remember, or Sylvester up the drain pipe, meow,
Meow.
may occur as a pantomime or as a gesticulation. Gesticulation. Whether or not the speaker creates the cognitive unit with which to combine the movement with speech is the key discriminating factor.
Discrimination. Oh.
Discriminating factor. Factor. Scaffolding, if it occurred, would seem to entail that pantomime, sign, and speech at some point crossed paths.
Cross paths.
Paths.
Cross paths.
There is a model of this coexistence for us to examine. Examine. Emery et al. 2005 observed frequent pairings of signs and speech by hearing, ASL, English bilinguals.
Bilinguals like us. Oh,
I think ASL means American Sign Language.
oh no.
Oh yes. While 94% of such pairings are signs and words, translating each other, 6% are not mutual translations. Translations.
Translations. Translations. Translations.
Translations. While 94% of such pairings are signs and words, translating each other, 6% are not mutual translations. Translations. In the latter, sign and speech collaborate to form sentences, half in speech, half in sign. In sign. For example, a bilingual says, all of a sudden looks at me. This could be scaffolding, but notice that it does not create the combination of unlike semiosis that we have described. Signs and words are of the same semiotic type, segmented, analytic, repeatable, listable, and so on, and so on. And so on. There's no global synthetic component and no built-in merging of analytic combinatoric forms and global synthesis. Synthesis. Of course, SIL English bilinguals have the ability to form growth point style cognitive units. Units. Units and unicorns, they are important.
We need more unicorns.
Unicorns for everyone. But if we imagine a transitional species evolving this ability, the Emory et al. Model suggests that scaffolding did not lead to growth point style cognition. On the contrary, it implies two analytic combinatoric codes dividing the work. Dividing the word. If we surmise that an old pantomime sign system did scaffold speech and then withered away, this leaves us unable to explain gesticulation with a special cognitive process we have described, emerged and became engaged with speech. With speech. We conclude that scaffolding, even if it occurred, would not have led to current day speech gesticulation linkages. Linkages. How do you pronounce it? You pronounce it linkages. It's hard to pronounce for a Swede. Our claim, in other words, is that Kendall's two aspects of utterance requires the qualitatively different mode of cognition we observe when speech and gesticulation combine. combine. And that gesture first in any of its versions cannot explain the origin of this cognition. Of this cognition. Moreover, we observe in the gestures of modern humans a sensitivity to discourse content and highly selective expression of discourse focal elements that undercuts and very good. An easy entree assumption. The discourse contextualized nature of gesture is compatible with the GP formulation, in fact, is required by GPs for differentiation. Differentiation, indeed. The growth point is required by the GP for differentiation. We are advocating the view that language evolved when the capacity to form speech gesture units was naturally selected. Speech and gesture would have evolved together. The plausibility of this hypothesis is bolstered by the observation that chimpanzees show hand dominance for gestures only when the movements co-occur with gestures, with vocalization. So only with vocalization do you have gestures. Very important.
Chimpanzees.
Or chimps, for short.
Chimpanzees. Yummy, yummy, yummy.
I don't know, maybe. Never tried. Barring independent evolution by chimps, such combinations would have existed in the last common human chimp ancestor. The last common human chimp ancestor and would have provided the raw material for co-opting the motor area by imagery, thought, and language. Barbara Tversky, Lisa Bartett, Feldman, and of course Lakoff Johnson. Pollock and Deval report that chimps and bonobos use brachiomanual gestures more flexibly across context than they do facial expressions and vocalizations. Vocalizations. Vocal this now. Although they regard this difference as support for gesture thirst, it is equally compatible with what we have argued is the more plausible hypothesis of gesture speech evolving jointly, not sequentially, not sequentially, not sequentially, but together, simultaneously, codependent and interwoven, Caleb.
Interwoven.
Togetherness, together, they came into the world like twins,
Bonobos and chimps, yummy, yummy, yummy.
They are small chimps, I think, I don't know. Gestures sensitive to context are just what Mead's loop wants.
Yummy, yummy.
I don't know. If gesture and vocalization were linked pre-adaptively as above, the impact of Mead's loop on Broca's area could orchestrate speech and gesture jointly. What bonobos and chimps may lack is precisely evolution via Mead's loop, a reason perhaps they have not advanced beyond gesture alone. The reading off process, the Mead's loop, are strictly a human thing.
Mead's loop, eat.
In the case of gesture, to sum up, gesture first predicts what did not evolve, pantomime as a step toward language, gesture a vestige to be shown the door, and does not predict what did evolve, the instability of simultaneous semiotic modes, the double essence, gesticulation, embodying discourse organization, the instability so necessary for meaning and for something new to evolve. In the Mead's loop model, in contrast, speaking could not have evolved without simultaneous gesture, and gesture could not have evolved without its duet with speech.
Speech.
Speech. Should I take the rest, or what do you think?
It's 5 spaces more. Actually, there's too much.
No,
Oh,
just notes.
You decide.
I finish it off.
Okay.
Conclusions. Framing the evolution of language. Question as one of when GP type cognition evolved skirts the holophrases versus combinatorics puzzle. Combinatorics puzzle. Puzzle. An unstable meshing of unlike semiotic modes craves stability. Instability arises even when primitive linguistic encodings mesh with imagery. Instability we get here. From this vantage point, we claim that sentences continue the evolution that started with growth points. Social fact encodings arise in the act of sharing information. Creating a discreteness filter such that the semiotic properties of segmentation and potential for combination arise automatically. Automatically. In GPs, such encodings, initially simple, already interlock with imagery. Sentences, whatever their complexity, stabilize growth points by adding information. Evolutionary, this step required two cultural and or biological extensions of the impulse to stabilize semiotic opposites, semiotic opposites. The coincidence of oppositions, as Ian McNeill would have written and did write, constructions which differentiate holistic meanings by adding semantic and syntactic frames. Semantic and syntactic frames and recursive embeddings.
Recursive embeddings. The word of the week. Recursive embeddings.
Which elaborate meanings by combining constructions. Thus, holophrases and composition would have arisen from growth points at the dawn, and may the development of grammar advantageous, coming already at the dawn.
Dawn.
When we get tired, we hold that language, neither speech nor gesture preceding, evolved as part of cognitive mode, integrating holistic imagery and discrete code. Discrete code. Code language, Kalle. Code language. This capability ushered in new modes of action, which we propose were initially speech and gesture, in which orientation to social interaction is inherent, conferring adaptive advantages, and so was naturally selected. Celine Dion. Titanic. Some of these steps may have required biological adaptations. We would expect these adaptations to occur in the system of motor control. Even more complex ways of orchestrating movements, oral, laryngeal, manual, under significances in which orientation to social interaction is inherent, is inherent, taking values other than those of the actions themselves. Chewing, screeching, manipulating, etc. Via gestures, significant imagery orchestrates motor behavior, and this was a key step in the origin of proto-language. So proto-language comes together with gestures, not one apart. And I would show something on the whiteboard. So I just want to show that Mead's loop actually is the loop of gesture and motoric movement, all movement. To better understand it, try to get away from the idea that a movement is a straight thing like this, going from T1 to T2 in the perpendicular system of Descartes or something similar, any geometric system that could possibly get that hint. No, the Mead's loop is a chaotic loop. It's more stable and it's built up of contradicting factors. It is not the past. Here, this is the past, that's the future, and maybe in between here, we have the present. No, it involves the past, but it's not only the past. So the David McNeill theory et al. Is that gestures came together with language. And one big proof there is that chimpanzees, they can only gesture when there are some sort of vocalization, some sort of speech. So they do not follow the idea of the pantomime development, that pantomime started and was the first. You have complex pantomime, where, like in American Sign Language, each thing means a morphemic thing, an atomic thing. And then that was somehow turned into spoken language. Maybe developed slowly from one to the other. No, they say gesture and language came simultaneous. They are codependent. And for me, a strong proof or indication of that is that still when we speak today, gesture is with speech, not without speech. It might not be that apparent. I can stand like this and still use gestures. My motor cortex will be involved, and there will be small movements in my muscular things in my arms, my fingers. I won't feel them, but they are always there. And it also is thinking in a way, because it progresses like the spiral. Here, like in Saussure, thinking is dead, like language. Everything is in the past. Nothing new happens. There is no new take out of language in connection with gesture, so to speak. Here we have a development. And Meads loops are particularly frequent in human beings. They never developed in chimpanzees and bonobos to accompanying and developing speech. Thank you very much. Could you pause? We can go to. So one of the problems here is a pantomime. It's a bit like American Sign Language. And at the end of page 127, there is a site there I think is rather important. Whether or not the speaker creates the cognitive unit, the end of the first paragraph, with which to combine the movement with speech is a key discriminating factor. It's the ability to combine and create what I call the instability. And page 128. And the second paragraph, 3 lines down. Although they regard this difference as support for gesture first, it is equally compatible with what we have argued is the more plausible hypothesis of gesture speech evolving jointly, not sequentially. And here we have a great connection also to Barbara Tversky. She's pointing to that hand movement and gestures are very close to thinking, dividing things, making connections, doing spiral happenings to understand, for instance, a motor engine or a complex system of subway traveling. With bonobos and chimps, the last of that paragraph, Malek is precisely evolution via meets loop. A reason perhaps they have not advanced beyond gesture. So they still have gesture. They also have some sort of pantomime, very simple. But the evolution via meets loop never happened. They never got to the next level of the spiral. In the last paragraph on that page, so it's the importance of the instability. Instability, the third line, arises even when primitive linguistic encodings mesh with imagery. It's the combination shown by Tversky, and here it's gesture and language, the parole and the langue coming together, creating an instability that gets resolved in something new. So it's not the circle going back to the same point. It's a spiral going to the next level. There is development. It's pointing to this perpetual development. So at the end of that paragraph, sentences, whatever their complexity, stabilize growth points by adding information, evolutionary. This step required two cultural and or biological extensions of the impulse to stabilize semiotic opposites, very important. So the gesture and the spoken language are opposites. One is holophrastic, or like a hologram. You could call that the wave. And language is atomistic, cut off. Together, they form a contradiction that is so important for the whole thing to grow. This is why it's called growth point. So the instability creates the growth point. Nothing is dead, everything is moving forward, and we seem to be in charge of what's happening in quite another way than in the Saussurean, more static way. Kalle Lundahl, please join the club. Welcome, take a leap.
So what are recursive embeddings?
Recursive embeddings.
They elaborate meanings by combining construction. Do they explain the word embeddings? No, it's only occurring there.
Yeah, I can give it a try. I'm not 100% sure, but it's one reading goes into one reading goes into one reading. One loop, one spiral goes into the other one. And this is this recursive, yeah, with a meets loop.
And recursive means what in this context?
Again and again and again. Almost like repetitive. Almost.
And constructions, they would be like syllables put together.
Could either be constructions in the form of syllables and gestures, or the combination of syllables and gestures. That group point.
One of your last points was excellent, namely that gestures could symbolize the wave function in quantum physics, while speech is more the particle.
Yeah, punctual, atomistic, separable in a way.
Excellent point. So in that way, we could actually rewrite it better than they formulated. Stabilize semiotic opposites. Particles standing for speech.
Yeah.
And waves symbolizing gestures. I think this is.
And together they also contradictory. Here they are contradictory. and in physics they're contradictory, in real life they're contradictory. They combine to make something new.
Let's give a simple explanation or example where gesture is contradictory to speech. Is there an example?
Sylvester coming through the drain pipe. So the speech would be, he goes into the drain pipe. It is separable. You can analyze each segment. Whereas the gesture here, it doesn't have parts. So you can't separate this gesture. It's a wholeness. It doesn't have a before and an after, like Sylvester goes into the drain pipe. So there is no sequence. It's there. It's there through the whole sentence. So it is a contradiction to the analytical mode. One is holistic, like a wave, and the other one is more like a particle.
Yes, and I would say this is my take that the rain pipe could itself be a symbol of wholeness with the W put between parentheses. Because you have a hole in a...
Excellent, whole and wholeness.
In a rain pipe you have the hole without the W, and then you have wholeness because you need the constructions to say the pipe itself. And you see it actually in this gesture, figure 1, namely it's also both points to the hole without the W, but also the wholeness of the rain.
Exactly. Both in one go, so to speak.
So also, of course, it is a very good explanation. Speech is like particle, wave is gestures, but we could also say that in gestures you have both wave and particle also, like in this gesture. Why so? You could say the whole, that is the whole of the without W, and its whole without W is actually the particle. But when you add the W, then you have the wave.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
And remember, in both
also wave begins with a W.
Yes, absolutely. I was coming to that.
Sorry.
Excellent. So we are on the same wavelength.
Even better. Congrats. You hit the spot there.
So let's say that W standing for wave and whole. I think that is excellent.
It's also mimetic, so you remember it better.
Absolutely. And I propose that we end this lecture with a funny picture.
Yeah, sure.
That will help us to remember this.
Take something.
With Sylvester in the drain.
Drain pipe.
Yes.
Drain.
I think it is will be enough. Hopefully, in the rain pipe.
Drain.
Yes, drain. Why am I thinking of drain? Drain pipe.
Well, there he is, the movie hooligan. Tweet in the Canary Row.
Tweety bowling ball.
He gets a bowling ball into the drain pipe.
La vidéo va bien de commencer. La vida
La
va bientôt
vidéo va
commencer.
bientôt commencer. Bientôt means quick or
Soon.
soon. Bientôt. Ah, that's why you say à bientôt to a person.
You see. You see the rain pipe. It meets before Silverstone.
And it becomes problematic. Indeed.
Yeah. It
He swallows the bowling ball and goes into the bowling alley. Goes into the bowling alley.
Okay,
Oh,
let's
very
enter.
good. Thank you very much, Kalle Lundahl. We got wave, we got wholeness, and we got an old particle. And thank you also Stephen and Rosen for giving that to us. It's a very nice and ambiguous, contradictory, progressive thing.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening in. Have an excellent day, morning, or night. Bye bye for now.
Yeah.